Hello guys, welcome back to another video. It has been quite some time, but today 1939 has just announced a brand new balance patch coming out later this month. So of course I am here to break it down, give you my thoughts, and let you know how I think it's going to impact you and the meta as a whole. So let's jump straight into it because this is a very surgical balance patch. Only 8 cards are being changed, and all of them are from the new Winter War expansion. So the first one being changed, I don't think this is a big surprise to a lot of people. It is the 64th Panzer Grenadiers. So this guy, it doesn't actually show the base form, the form you see in your collection. That is a 2-cost, 2/3 with Blitz. Becomes Veteran if it starts your turn in the front line. And the old Veteran version on the left is when it becomes Veteran, gain 3 additional credits this turn. The new version is gain 2 additional credits this turn. So the combo I'm sure you have seen on ladder and lost to a number of times was War Production and push 64th Panzer Grenadiers to the front line on turn 1. Now, that's still in the game because War Production's still in the game and Panzer Grenadiers still has Blitz and it still costs 2. So you can still get Panzer Grenadiers to the front line on turn 2, but it means on turn 2, you can get it to the front line on turn 1, but it means if you do this on turn 2, you will now have 4 credits rather than 5 credits, which is a pretty substantial deal. There's some marks at, like, basically just the number of credits that you get for free in the beginning of the game being toned down is just a good thing. Like, you could think that maybe they could have nerfed this harder, and they absolutely could have nerfed this harder, but also, it was entirely possible that they just didn't nerf this card and rather nerfed, like, the sort of powerful finishers of this type of German aggro deck. So I think the fact that we get a nerf, and it's a nerf that does something, like, this is going to impact them losing a credit, is going to make it less valuable to run this combo. But it's still probably going to be good. You're still probably going to see it. But I definitely think this brings it in line. I think it's certainly less scary to see this go off, and crucially, if you play this on turn 2, it means on turn 3, you would previously get 6 credits on turn 3, which would allow you to then play Jet Prototype, which would win you the game 90% of the time. Now you would need to do that on turn 4, and by turn 4, almost every deck in the game is going to have answers to that, or be able to, like, play down, like, a big guard, that makes your 6 credits matter less. So, still very good. Still going to be a 3/3 on turn 1 that gives you 2 additional credits that just, like, sort of pays for itself. But, you know, not nearly as insane as before. But, keeping with nerfing the #1 deck in the game right now, we have the Jet Prototype nerf, and this one's savage. It's absolutely savage if you just exclusively compare it to what it is now and what it used to be. But I also think it's, like, still a fair card that is good and has potential to see competitive play. So that just sort of tells you how insane the old Jet Prototype was. So the new Jet Prototype, it starts with 5 attack rather than 1, but the big difference is it now has 6 operation cost rather than 0, and instead of gaining attack for every even cost card you remove off the top of your deck, you now get -1 operation cost for each even cost card you remove off the top of your deck. Meaning that if you play this and you hit 6 even cards, because your entire deck is even, it's a 6 cost, 0 operation, 5/4 blitz. Which is really good. That's just a really good card. If you play this and you hit 5, it's a 6 cost, 1 operation cost, 5/4 blitz, and that's still a pretty good card, but the big difference is not knowing the operation cost of a blitz unit you are playing is really, really bad. So if you play this with odd cards in your deck, even if you run, like, 1 odd card, like you just run Nakshub, it means that if you play Jet Prototype on turn 6, there is always going to be a chance that you hit your 1 Nakshub and then you can't attack with the unit because it has 1 operation cost rather than 0. So that's going to completely change the way the deck is played. And if you compare it to the old version where it just gains attack, like, if you play Jet Prototype and you hit 4 cards, basically it's going to be the same unit, but it now has 2 operation costs. If you play this unit and you hit all 6 cards, it's going to be the same unit, but with -2 attack. So it is just going to be 100% of the time worse than before. I mean, I suppose, arguably, if you play this and hit 0 even cost units, you would rather have a 6 operation cost 5/4 than a 0 operation cost 1/4. But, like, you know, if you're playing this in a deck, you're never hitting more than 2 odd cards, unless you're just either ludicrously unlucky or building the deck wrong. Um, but I'm happy with this change. I'm very happy with this change because I think the running even cost cards or running odd cost cards, I think that's a very interesting design space. It's a design space I really liked in Hearthstone, even if they did it terribly by making the cards way too broken. But I'm happy that the design space still exists, and I'm happy that it exists moving forward. Like, doing something weird, like making Jet Prototype an odd cost card would be really weird. Or just, like, completely annihilating this card to the point where you wouldn't even want to run it in an all-even cost deck. That would be really tragic. So, like this, if your deck is all-even cost, this is a good card. Now, is this card good enough to run an all-even cost deck anymore? I'm not sure. We'll have to see. I think that it still has potential as a tier 2 deck. With US Ally, I think the Soviet Ally version is going to be a lot weaker since it did rely on that really heavy-hitting Jets. But yeah, again, I'm really happy with this being kept in the game. And crucially, this now has some bolster synergy. Now, I don't think this is a good deck, but it is a funny deck. Because if you play this with the US cost bolster, the US card bolster, and you play Jet Prototype and you hit 6 odd cost cards, and then you play bolster on this unit, you make it into an 11-10 with Blitz, which is pretty good. Now, that does require you to run an even cost bolster and an even cost Jet Prototype, and you almost certainly want War Machines in that deck to get it out quicker. Or so that even cost War Machines, and then the rest of your deck needs to be odd. So, you know, it's not a good it's not a good combo, but it's something worth mentioning. And keeping in tune with the nerfing the hell out of Germany, we have the swag being gutted. Now, if you watched the 2023 World Championship, you saw a lot of Jet and you saw a lot of swag. This card was absolutely broken. I brought 12 of them, I think. Is that true? I might have actually brought, I brought them in, no, I didn't bring them in Soviet, yeah, so I brought 12 of these to World Championship. They turned out great, and I think I even said in an interview that I thought this card was going to be nerfed in the first patch, and here it is, it's the first patch after the expansion, and swag is being nerfed. It's going from 3 credits to 4 credits. This is good. It means you can't play it on turn 1 with war production anymore, which is something that, I was doing a lot of in Worlds. And just getting it out slower, like, it's harder to run in Jagro, it's harder to run in Frontline, just, you know, getting it out. Turn 4, especially in Frontline, there's a lot of things you want to be doing on turn 4, whereas turn 3 is usually, like, a weaker turn in Frontline. So having just a really, really powerful 3-drop you can play in Frontline was really good. Turn 4, you have a lot of good turn 4 plays, especially with the 20th Panzer Grenadier now. So, swag's gonna be, it's not gonna be a 4 of in every deck. Just going to 4 cost, I think it's still going to see play. Maybe not immediately, but this is still a card you want to be thinking of, just because the effect is so ludicrously powerful. 4 health on an artillery is really good. 1 attack, it does not matter, because you're playing this for the suppress ability. And just suppress 2 things on a body, like suppress 2 things a turn on a body. Really, really good. Also just Fury artillery, that's a bit hard to remove. Really good with any form of buffing attack. This is still just going to be a good card that, you know, you're going to see play, you're going to want to run it, you're going to think about it when you're doing deck building. But I think it's going to take a step back from being, like, the face of the meta alongside Jet. And I think that's a really, really good change. Now, I would have liked to see this maybe go down to a 3 health, as well as going to 4 cost. Just because, like, even at 1-4, this is so much better than any other artillery in the game, with, like, the exception of, like, Katyusha. And that's basically it. Like, there's Sexton, Autocanone, Katyusha, and, like, what other artilleries have seen, like, any play? Like, the new Soviet elite one, I guess, that returns to hand. But, like, SWG, compared to any other standard, limited, or even special, and most elite artillery, is still better than them at a standard that was nerfed. So, yeah, you know, this card's still insane, but, another interesting thing I will note is now that it goes to 4 cost, it makes it an even cost card. And before, a lot of players, myself included, were running swags in Jet and just taking that risk that sometimes you're gonna remove a swag off the top of your deck with Jet, and then you're gonna lose out on an attack. However, as I mentioned previously, with Jet, you're gonna be wanting to run an almost entirely even cost deck now, just so you can consistently play Jet on 6 without having to worry. And with Swag going to 4, yes, it's a nerf, but it also means that you can now run Swag in Jet without having to worry about losing out on the operation cost. So that's a little bit of like a nice thing. That, you know, Jet players, you're receiving a lot of nerfs, but like, hey, at least this nerf sort of takes some of the pain away, because it nerfs it into a way that makes your deck slightly better if you want to run this card still. And now we move away from Germany, but we're keeping with the nerfs. We have Frozen Assets going from 3 cost to 4 cost. This is the finish order that summons the CC with Blitz and Salvage, and the CC, of course, is the 1/1 unit that destroys any unit it damages. So I think a lot of players might be a little shocked by this, because, you know, Finland has not been a crushing the meta, and Frozen Assets, like, when you lose to Finland, you normally think of losing to the Sissioto, or I forget what the card's called, but the 2-cost guy that gains +1/+1 every time you do anything. You know, I'm sure people think of that card when they lose to Finland. I'm sure they just think of like all of the British elites with a Finland package when they lose to Finland. I'm sure few people think of Frozen Assets, but Frozen Assets is a really, really powerful card. It's a really, really powerful effect. It's essentially just 4 credits, remove any unit, and to salvage it. With some exceptions, obviously, it can't get around guard. It can't get through heavy armor without additional buffs, but it's really easy to reach the support line with this. It's really easy to just remove the biggest thing, like a 5th Rangers, if you're against frontline. It's just a very powerful card, and the fact that 1939 is nerfing Finland after it has seen limited competitive play makes me think that they have stats on this card that says Frozen Assets was insane. Like, I don't think they would just be nerfing Finland for the sake of, like, being fair and nerfing everything, you know? If they're nerfing Frozen Assets, it means they have internal statistics that say Frozen Assets was an absolutely ludicrously broken card. So, you know, with this being changed, I think it's fine. I think at 4 costs, you're not going to just throw 4 copies of this into every single finished deck ever, but I think that's a good thing. And at 4 cost, I think you're still going to be running several of these in any Finnish control deck, just because it's a really good card, but you're not going to be running 4 copies of it maybe anymore. And as I said, I think that's pretty good. Also, this was a draft card. Like, this card I don't play draft, but from what I've understood and heard, this card was just sort of like the terror of draft, because, you know, it's Finnish, there's very few Finnish cards, and this is a standard, so you're like, if you pick Finland in draft, you're getting 4 Frozen Assets and you're winning. So yeah, this is a nice change. Then we have another nerf. We have the nerf to Line of Engagement. I am very happy with this change. So Tokens has become incredibly playable, arguably tier 1 since this expansion. It hasn't seen a ton of competitive play. Obviously, it performed really, really well in Worlds, but since then it has not seen a ton of competitive play, just because it's sort of held back by Jet a little bit. You run very few guards, very few healing, and you're slightly slower. You can't really stop the turn 1 64th Panzer Grenadiers. If Swag hits the board on turn 1, you're just getting farmed for the rest of the game. So, Tokens was a deck that was being held back by Swag, but it's a deck that is just able to crush most other things, and Line of Engagement was a core part of this combo. Now, obviously, there is the Baron of Vichy, like the new, your Tokens have Alpine guy, and that's like a new huge finisher against a lot of decks, but just the consistency of Line of Engagement as a standard. Previously, it would be 2 cost, add a light infantry to your hand, to the support line, and if possible, to the front line. If possible, meaning if you control it and there's space, or if it's empty. Which would mean that on turn 2, you could create 3 light infantry, 2 of which are on the board. That's insane. If you compare that to reserves, which is 1 cost, create 2 light infantry, and they're both in your hand. Line of Engagement is 2 cost, create 3, and 2 are already on the board, and one of them's already moved up on the board. And it just led to, like, absolutely crazy turns where you do, like, you know, turn 2 Line of Engagement, turn 3 Frontal Assault, or, like, play out the 1 Frontal Assault, or turn 3 the motors to buff them up to 2/2s. Line of Engagement made Tokens, like, almost favorable into J-Grow, just because of the sheer number and speed at which they can get tokens onto the board compared to before. So the nerf to line of engagement is now add 2 light infantry units to the battlefield, 1 in the front line if possible. So I think this means that if you can't add it to the front line, it's add 2 light infantry to the support line. Because it is add 2 light infantry to the battlefield, comma, 1 in the front line if possible, not add 2 light infantry to the battlefield if possible. So this is still going to be a really good card, but it's slightly less value overall. You don't get the 1 in the hand. This actually does make it slightly better if you don't control the front line, because previously, if you didn't control the front line, you'd get 1 in the support line, 1 in your hand. Now it's 2 in the support line. So it's actually better if you're behind, but it is not as just like crushingly good if you're in the front. And it's not a huge nerf overall. Like, it's 1 less token in hand. So, you know, just taking slight bit of value away from tokens out of a card that is still going to be a 4 of in every tokens deck ever until the end of time. I think that's a good call. I'm very happy with this change. When I remember playing against tokens in Worlds, where it's like looking at the token stack, I don't think, like, it was good, but like I don't think it was that good. And then practicing against tokens, and like practicing against tokens, it was like if they had turn 2 line of engagement, turn 3 line of engagement, you lost the game. If they didn't have turn 2 line engagement, you had like a 90% win rate. So, you know, just having a card that's just like that powerful and has that much of an impact on the game that early in the game, not great. And this doesn't like nerf tokens into the dirt. Tokens is still probably going to be a tier 1 deck after this patch. Now we get on to the change to production order, and as you see, there's no actual like red boxes on this because the production order itself has not been changed. It is the 2 bombers you get off of production order that has been changed. And 1939 is saying that this is not a nerf or a buff, it's simply a rework. It's a nerf. Like, let's be frank, it is a massive nerf. So previously, the 2 bombers you got were the B-24D, which costs 3 less to deploy if you control a unit with 3 or more operation cost, which kind of sucks. And then there was the B-24J, which was deployment suppress all enemy units, which is an absolutely insane effect, and also it had blitz. So you just pick the B-24J 100% of the time. Like, it literally was just, like, objectively better than the B-24D. Even if you could play B-24D on turn 4 100% of the time, you would still probably rather pick B-24J to have in your hand. Like, it was not even close. So the change was they moved the blitz from B-24J to B-24D, so now it's an actual choice. Because you can pick B-24J 100% of the time, just to have a suppress the entire board. Not even suppress the entire board, suppress the entire enemy's board, which is a ludicrously powerful effect. However, it will no longer allow you to just go blitz phase. Like, you will no longer just be able to do double B-24J as your win condition in Brit Ramp. Now, you might have to pick B-24D, which could actually let you theoretically blitz out quicker, although Brit Ramp runs less 3-op cost units. Does not really run a ton of them. But yeah, you could theoretically blitz out faster or cheaper to combo with stuff like Halifax. However, it will no longer be suppressing the entire board while you do that, which is really, really good. This is a wonderful change. I'm very happy with this change. I hated Jet Production. That card was insane. So, you know, overall, this is the last nerf. There's 2 buffs that we're going to look at after this, but overall, I'm very happy with these nerfs. There's the nerf to the 3 German cards, and you might be thinking, well, that's like going really hard after Germany. Germany hasn't been like super meta in a long time. That seems harsh. It's like Germany is still going to be good after this patch, and like all 3 of these cards needed nerfs. This was not just like nerf everything to the ground. This was like very strategic nerfs at just the best cards of the expansion, which were Swag and Jet Prototype. Like, so yeah. Overall, I think this is a very good patch. You have the massive nerfs to Jet. Jet is no longer going to be the top dog. But while you're at it, you also have targeted nerfs at tokens, which would have probably just swept in as the next thing to do. Also a targeted nerf to ramp, which I'm very happy about this because just the power of Brit ramp on ladder and in tournaments is not being a super good deck, because obviously it can get raffle stomped by most aggro things, but it was just crushing any other control deck because you just have 2 B-24Js. Like, how do you... One, it's very difficult to stop B-24J from connecting phase to begin with. And two, it makes it even harder when it's also suppressing your entire board. Like, this was just an absolute control killer. I'm very glad that this is gone. So now let's look at the buffs. Now, this is a buff that I do not like. This is the first thing in this balance patch. I do not like Winter Regiment, which is the 4-cost 4/4 Blitz salvage fully repair this unit when it salvages a unit Japanese special, which is probably the best Japanese card that Japan got this expansion. This card is absolutely cracked. And it now is a 4/5. They gave it +1 health. This is an insane difference. Like, this difference is ludicrous. It is difficult to understate how good this change is. Because Winter Regiment fully heals. It's a little bit like Schutzen. Where Schutzen is, if it destroys a unit, veteran it, turn it into the 5/5. This is if it destroys a unit, fully heal it. So it turns into a 4/5, but it can repeat, whereas Schutzen is a one-time effect. So it's actually very, very, very comparable to Schutzen. And if Schutzen was a 4/4 instead of a 4/5, and honestly, that might be a balance patch we see someday, wouldn't even be that surprised. But if Schutzen was a 4/4, it would be a lot worse. Because you know what else is a 4/4? 5th Rangers. And 5th Rangers is an absolutely cracked card. Don't get me wrong. Like, 5th Rangers is insane. But the thing is, what are, like, the biggest 4 health units in the game? Or, like, the most played 4 health units in the game? They're going to be Sherman, and they're going to be 5th Rangers. So the difference between trading with a Sherman or a 5th Rangers versus killing it and then fully healing to just get a massive tempo boost is huge. Like, this is why Schutzen started being played in Frontline and in Jagro, despite already having a lot of 4-drops in Frontline, and in Jagro it being, like, quite a bit slower than any other unit they have. It's just because it trades out with 5th Rangers, which, like, turn 4 5th Rangers to the front line is, like, a ludicrously common turn. And now Winter Regiment enters that ranks of cards that can just trade into 5th Rangers, trade into Sherman, and then fully repair. And so you might be thinking, well, if it's fine for Schutzen to exist, why is it bad for Winter Regiment to exist? I'm not necessarily saying Winter Regiment is, like, so much better than Schutzen. I'm not even necessarily saying it's better than Schutzen at all. I think it probably is, but, like, just on its own, like, if you could run either in any deck ever, without considering deck restrictions, I think you'd probably lean towards Winter Regiment, but they're very, very close. But the more of the difference, like, the difference in my mind is Schutzen is already a very powerful card that, like, there's definitely an argument for, like, potentially nerfing it now or in the future. Like, Schutzen is just a ludicrously powerful card. And Winter Regiment was already a very, very good card. Like, Winter Regiment was a very good card. And I think the reason they did this is because they gave Japan a salvage theme, and it has fallen flat on its face. Nobody's playing Japan salvage. Nobody's playing Japan-Finland salvage. No one's playing Finland salvage anything. So I think their thought was, well, Winter Regiment is sort of the core card of salvage. Like, Winter Regiment is very, very powerful card. So let's make their core card of salvage better. This will make people run salvage more. No, it won't. This doesn't improve salvage whatsoever. Like, well, obviously, like, a very tiny amount. But this has almost no impact on how good salvage is as a deck, because the problem with salvage is you have Winter Regiment, and you have scrap metal, and you have basically nothing else. Like, there's no win condition to the salvage deck. There's no payoffs for the salvage deck. You just have a couple cards that say salvage, and then they do nothing. Like, other than that, it's just absolutely nothing. So they could have buffed, like, they could have buffed, like, the other lesser, like, harder to play salvage cards to make it a wider range of salvage cards. Like, they could have buffed Mixed Regiment, for example, or instead of even relying on balance patches to do this, they could have just, like, waited until, like, a skirmish or, like, a mini expansion. I don't know if they're going to do mini expansions, but they could have just waited until the next time they introduce a card to the game and introduced an actual Japanese salvage payoff that makes it you want to run salvage. Whereas this change to Winter Regiment, I think the intention was to make salvage good, and instead all you're going to do is make a staple of every single Japan main and Japan ally deck until the end of time, because why would you not run Winter Regiment in any sort of mid-range deck? And I don't even necessarily think you'd run this in Jagro. Like, it's still a little bit too slow, and you'd just rather run Schutzen, because it does the burn damage. But, like, just, I don't know. I think making another just absolute staple of the format that, like, all other cards and the meta has to be, like, balanced around, to try to make a unplayable archetype slightly more playable. I don't know. I feel like you're just restricting yourself in the future on what things you could do by making this change. And I don't think this is going to have like a huge impact immediately on the meta. Like, I don't think winter regiments are going to start taking over the meta all of a sudden. But just, I don't know. I feel like you're backing yourself into a corner design space wise with this change. And then we get to the other change, which I have a lot less strong feelings about. There's the detached battalion, which is the Finnish 2/3 salvage deployment to destroy a unit with 2 cost or less. It now has smokescreen. So it makes it more likely for you to be able to salvage 2 things with this, because you salvage something with a deployment effect, and then instead of being immediately traded off, because it's a 2/3, it now has smokescreen, so you can keep it around until you can bring something down to 2 health and then trade off with the detached battalion. So I think that's pretty cool. Like, obviously, this is a pretty substantial buff to this card, but it's still salvage. I think it's a little bit too slow. I feel like 2 cost units. I mean, I suppose the benefit is 2 cost units almost always have blitz if you play it against aggro. But yeah, I mean, I just feel like you would rather play a guard, or an AoE rather than detached battalion, because I don't think there's enough payoff to having salvage guards in your hand. But you know, maybe one day. So I think this is an all-around positive change. So that brings us to the end of the January 2024 balance patch. I will quickly check if they have announced when this comes out, because this is going to be coming out sometime this month. I can tell you that already. And this is very good. Like, if you've played the cards at any point since the expansion drop, like since Worlds happened, it has just been jet. Like, it's not been a fun meta. Like, it was fun at first. Just because, you know, it's a brand new deck, it's a brand new archetype, it's for a nation that's not been played a lot on ladder in a long time. But, you know, after losing on like turn 3 for like the 3rd time in a row, it gets old really, really fast. And I think this is going to open up the meta a lot. I think there's a lot of possibilities that were being held back by Jet. And I think 1939 did a very good job at sort of predicting and doing these preemptive tiny changes to things so that we don't just, like, you know, get out of Jet meta and immediately fall into tokens meta or something like that. And then they also said in the dev blog, which will be linked in the description, that this was meant to be sort of like targeted changes to keep the meta a little bit fresh. And then they're aiming at a much bigger balance patch in March, where they will likely be willing to nerf cards that are outside of this expansion. So that might be when they got War Production, or they might just wait until they rotate War Production. I would be shocked if War Production is a playable card in 6 months. I think they have learned that lesson. And yeah, here it is. The balance patch is scheduled to go live on January 18th. So that's in about a week as of recording. And that means that the next OCC Finals top 8 is going to be played on the new patch. So, you know, you don't have to see Jet get banned in every single set. And that's actually going to be very interesting. It's going to open up a lot in terms of deck building. And I'm very excited to see that. I will be casting that, so you should catch the upcoming OCC, which is going to be on the last Saturday of the month. Keep updated. I will try to update you on that. And yeah, I am now back. Obviously, can't promise I'm going to be back to like weekly uploads, twice a week uploads. Certainly not that back. I'm still in grad school. But you know, I'm still here. I'm alive. I won Worlds. If you missed that, very happy about that. And let me know what type of videos you are interested in seeing. Since, you know, a balance patch video, very easy to make. Just they announce balance patches. I show balance patches. I talk about balance patches. But I'm very interested in hearing what type of videos people are interested in moving forward, because, you know, I might not be doing Road to Rank 1 anymore, just because I'm not that interested in trying to make it into OCC anymore. You know, watch my last video if you want to get more on that, but TLDR, I'm very frustrated at the Kards esports, and don't really want to invest my time into making it into OCC. So that means my sort of video schedule is wide open. So if you have any ideas, let me know in the comments down below or in my Discord. I won't I can't promise that I will do them, but I will certainly listen to them. And if there's overwhelming support for one idea or, just something that seems really interesting to me, I will consider it. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you in the next one.
What a performance there by J King.
J King, full plot armor.
J King is pushing himself into the ranks of the legend.
J King is our world champion! J King 7! What? The back-to-back Cards world champion!